Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. Court awards St. James taxi operator over $17 million in damages for unlawful detention during 2018 state of emergency. Opposition supports SOE in St. Catherine but says government is failing at crime. And later in sports, Steph Curry leads the Golden State Warriors to 7th NBA title. I'm Giovanni Dennis and here are the details. We begin with a developing story with news that the Supreme Court has ruled that the fundamental rights of St. James-based taxi operator Roshane Clark was violated while he was detained under the state of emergency in 2018. Jamaica Maitland was in court and now joins us live on the phone. Jamaica, what's the details of this ruling?
Thanks, Giovanni. So Justice Chester Stamp and his team, they were ruling on a series of matters, and the first included determining whether the emergency clause, the state of public emergency back in 2018 in St. James, violated Mr. Roshane Clark's Charter of Fundamental Rights, and if so, the court also had to prove whether the breaches were justified, and they also had to consider whether Mr. Clark's constitutional rights were infringed, and to also address whether he was entitled to any redress. And this morning, the court ruled that Mr. Clark's fundamental right to freedom of movement and fundamental right to liberty were breached. Now, the court said that it was unconstitutional, as, the powers of the state of public emergency gave the authority the right to infringe on the movement of a wide class of persons, and there was no evidence to establish that, it was justified. And Mr. Clark, he would have been locked up for almost a year back in 2018, and the court basically ruled that his right to liberty, right to be informed as it relates to why he was being detained, and when that right was acknowledged as being breached, he was denied the right to be taken to court within a reasonable time. So that was the general gist of the court ruling this morning.
Jamaica, this comes against the background of concerns about the states of emergency since that time that you've been mentioning. I remember John Clark and Isaac Buchanan represented some clients as well who raised similar concerns. What's the significance of the ruling given the context that we find ourselves in now as a country regarding states of public emergency?
Right, that's correct. No, one of the attorneys representing Roshane Clark, and that's Mr. Michael Hilton, he described the ruling as timely. And I asked timely in what sense? Because as you are aware, the public should be aware, that a state of public emergency was declared in St. Catherine this morning. And he says while he's not able to determine whether or not the declaration this morning was justified, he is able to say that it should in some way influence how the government detains people, whether or not they are aware of why they're being detained, how long they're being detained for, and if it is that they should, come before the tribunal that the government has said they're setting up to hear the cases of people. So he was a little bit reluctant to speak on this morning's case, but he did say it's a landmark ruling and it should determine how the government go about state of public emergency and the detention of people in relation to their Charter of Fundamental Rights.
All right, so as you heard there, Queen's Counsel Michael Hilton describing the ruling this morning as a landmark ruling. Of course, we'll get more on this story from Jamaica in primetime news, but as Jamaica mentioned, Prime Minister Andrew Holness declared a state of public emergency for St. Catherine amidst an increase in crime and violence. Now, the announcement was made during a press briefing at Jamaica House this morning. Kelisha Williams has that story.
Many anticipated that some form of security measure would be announced when the office of the Prime Minister sent out this tweet late Tuesday night. Minutes after 8 o'clock Friday morning, the declaration.
His Excellency, the Governor-General, has declared a state of public emergency for the parish of St. Catherine. The Commissioner of Police and the Chief.
He said the decision came after careful consideration and review of the current crime situation in St. Catherine.
I decided to advise the Governor-General to make such a declaration on the recommendation of the Chief of Defense Staff and the Commissioner of Police. Today, I will give the public a strategic understanding of the actions of the government as it relates to crime fighting and dealing with violence in the society. Government has as its first responsibility the preservation and the protection of life.
As for the boundaries of the state of emergency, Chief of Defense Staff Rear Admiral Antoinette Weems-Gorman said it essentially covers the entire parish of St. Catherine. This means there will be checkpoints throughout the parish.
While we acknowledge that persons may be concerned about the implications of the internal security operations that occur under a state of public emergency, citizens can be assured that the JDF will operate within the parameters of their training and resources to ensure the protection of the human rights of all Jamaicans.
On Tuesday, 3 persons were shot and killed in Spanish Town, and there have been several other violent activities in the parish since then. Police Commissioner Major General Anthony Anderson painted a picture of the crime situation in the parish since the start of the year.
As at June 15, the St. Catherine North Division recorded 70 murders and 51 shootings, representing a 52% and 76% increase respectively when compared to the similar period in 2021. Meanwhile, in the St. Catherine South Division, 58 murders were recorded over the period, as was the case last year.
In the meantime, persons living outside St. Catherine are being urged not to harbor criminals who may be migrating from the parish. Kalisha Williams, TVJ.
And several persons have been detained for questioning following the declaration of the state of public emergency in the St. Catherine North and South Police Divisions this morning. TVJ News understands that a suspect who was wanted for murders and shootings in the St. Catherine South Division was held in an operation in Gregory Park in Portmore this morning. An illegal gun was also seized. Since early this morning, members of the police and military have been carrying out operations in search of the men behind the flare-up of gang violence in Spanish Town, St. Catherine. Several persons have been killed in the violence over the past few weeks. And the opposition People's National Party, PNP, says it supports the imposition of the state of emergency in St. Catherine. PNP chairperson Dr. Angela Brown-Burke says her party does not have an issue with SOEs, which were challenged in the Supreme Court. She contends that the contention is using the measure as a long-term crime-fighting tool.
St. Catherine, in more recent times, we have seen a real uptick, a real upsurge. And I believe that what we really need to see is a well-thought-out plan in terms of crime-fighting strategy for not just St. Catherine, but for the rest of the island, where we see issues like these rearing their heads at the heart of creating this kind of mayhem in our country. But I believe that we also have to be very clear that the police, that they are using their intelligence, that they are gathering their information, and that what they're doing is evidence-based.
Meanwhile, opposition leader Mark Golding has given the government a failing grade for its handling of crime. It comes as murders and shootings continue in St. Catherine despite the imposition of curfews in sections of Spanish Town. Mr. Golding says the government's use of states of emergency is not working.
Because the murder rate in the country continued at a very high rate, and it just encouraged serious criminals to move out of the areas where the states of emergency were into other areas which had been relatively calm and peaceful before and became hotbeds of violent crime.
A day after 3 people were killed in Spanish Town, Mr. Holness reasoned that there seems to be a barrier between tackling crime and violence and the support needed to do it. But the opposition leader has rubbished that reasoning.
And I don't know why the Prime Minister is worrying about legal and political arguments. What he needs to worry about is the job he's there to do, which is to ensure proper government of the country. And in this particular area, which is national security, they're really not doing a good job at all, and they need to step up and improve, because I don't believe that the legal tools that are available to them are inadequate. I think they're adequate. I think what is happening is that they're not focusing on some of the critical areas.
And we now take a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. Welcome back. We're continuing the news. A total of 7 people have now been charged in the multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that saw $46 million being deducted from a JMB customer's bank account. According to the Financial Investigations Division, FID, 4 more people were charged earlier this week. They are 48-year-old Sophia Dobson and 28-year-old Raquel Morrison, both from Caladium Crescent, Kingston 11. Jashawn Brown, an unemployed 23-year-old of a Penwood Crescent address, and Everald McKenzie, a 25-year-old warehouse supervisor of a Waltham Avenue address. Earlier in May, the police charged 3 women from Kingston addresses: 35-year-old cashier Stashani Smelly from Sarah Street, Keho Hibbert, unemployed woman from Mary Avenue, and Tamara White, a 25-year-old unemployed woman from Spanish Town Road. A final suspect is in police custody awaiting legal representation. Now, the group has been charged under the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Larceny Act, and the Cyber Crimes Act. To other news, Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton is appealing to Jamaicans this afternoon to slow down when using the nation's roads. He spoke during a recent tour of the St. Anne's Bay Regional Hospital, where he noted that a number of health facilities across the island are treating trauma cases related to motor vehicle crashes. He said this is a huge burden on the hospitals that has to be addressed.
We cannot manage to respond as a hospital, in this case St. Anne's Bay, in the parish of St. Anne, which is the only facility to provide certain services. We cannot respond to an unlimited number of these accident cases. It's just not possible, it's not practical, and we can't build a hospital to facilitate if we have a society that is unruly and decides to do what they want, but then expect the hospital to respond in that way.
Meanwhile, Dr. Tufton said the Ministry of Health is looking at final designs to expand some hospitals and plans to enhance customer service in health facilities soon.
And here at St. Anne's Bay, we will be embarking on additional training. We will be looking at areas where people wait and enhance those wait areas, giving people places to sit, giving them a glass of water if necessary, improving the customer care agent's presence so that, we can respond to questions and queries. It's very important that we do that. And also receiving the concerns, logging them, and doing something about them. And I've charged the management.
And it's now time for the Business Minute with Cody and Barrett.
The government is to spend $31 billion on hard infrastructure this year in a bid to boost climate resilience on the island. Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Matthew Samuda, made the announcement at the Regional Ministers of Tourism Summit.
We're going to ensure that our roads that connect us to our transport hubs are the sorts of roads that can withstand significant climatic and weather events. That will allow the sector to get back up much faster.
The Jamaica Business Development Corporation, JBDC, is prepping 20 companies for listing on the stock market as part of the agency's Accelerator program. JBDC wants to create a conveyor network to get the entities formalized and listed on the junior market of the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And in the Business Review this Sunday, we take a look at how one beauty school managed to stay afloat during the pandemic. That's it for the Business Minute. I'm Cody Ann Barrett.
And it's time for the top regional and international stories with Sandy Williams.
In the region, Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown is calling for CARICOM leaders to approach Venezuela for assistance in dealing with the rising costs of energy products. Mr. Brown made the call while he criticized the trade embargo placed on Venezuela by the United States. He said Washington's sanctions against the South American country are negatively impacting the wider region. In August 2019, President Donald Trump imposed a freeze on all Venezuelan government assets in the United States and barred transactions with U.S. citizens and companies. On the international scene, Protests against the Indian government's new armed forces recruitment scheme have escalated on Friday, with hundreds of protesters, many of them students, blocking trains and setting stationary trains on fire. The protests come after the Indian government expanded recruitment to people aged 17.5 to 21 years under a new scheme. However, these recruits will not have pension or subsidized health benefits, and only up to 25% of each group will be allowed to enroll in the regular cadre of the armed forces. And those were the top regional and international stories. I'm Sandy Williams.
And we now head to a quick break. When we come back, Jermaine Brown will have the midday sports.
Welcome back. It's now time for your lunchtime sports. Let's head over to Antigua, shall we? Where the West Indies have continued to wrestle control of the first test against Bangladesh, reaching 182 for 3 at sports time. This in their first innings reply in the post-lunch session on day 2 at the Sir Vivian Richards Stadium. They lead by 78 runs, having resumed on 95 for 2. Captain Craig Brathwaite has carried on to 88 from his overnight 42, and with him is vice-captain Jamaica's Jermaine Blackwood on 18. Another Jamaican, Nkrumah Bonner, was dismissed this morning for 33 after resuming on 12. Bangladesh had made 103 all-out in their first innings. And staying on cricket, Woolmer's boys are champions of the Issa Urban Area Under 15 cricket competition after defeating Excelsior High by 6 wickets in a rain-affected final on Thursday. In a match reduced to 40 overs aside due to soggy conditions caused by overnight rain, Excelsior were bowled out for 94 in 35.1 overs after being sent to bat. DeMarcus Scott making 52 against Nicholas Mackenzie, 4 for 26. Ajani Banton also took 2 for 14. Now in reply, the Ulmerians posted 95 for 4 in 24.3 overs to achieve victory. Brian Charles Largy top scored with 40 not out, while Banton chipped in with 24. Jelani Watson took 2 for 25 for Excelsior. Some basketball news now. The Golden State Warriors are the 2021-2022 NBA champions. They beat the Boston Celtics 103-90 in Game 6 of the finals in Boston on Thursday night to claim their 4th NBA title in 8 years and first since 2018. Steph Curry, twice the MVP in the regular season, was the finals MVP for the first time. The 34-year-old point guard averaged 31.2 points in the 6 games and scored 34 points in Thursday's win, adding 7 assists and 7 rebounds. Andrew Wiggins also scored 18 points and Jordan Poole 15 for Golden State. Meanwhile, Golden State also won the title in 2015, 2017 and 2018, but lost the 2016 and 2019 finals before missing out on the playoffs in the past 2 seasons while rebuilding their squad. Now, Curry is the 7th player to win at least 4 championships and 2 regular season MVP awards. All right, some tennis news now. Matthew Rodriguez was crowned Class 1 champion in the second match of the series of the NCB King Alarm Amateur Tennis Tournament. Rodriguez got the better of Nicholas Chung by 2 sets to 1. It all started with things going Rodriguez's way as he took the first set 6-3. But he was pegged back in the second as Chung fought back to level, also winning 6-3. However, Rodriguez proved the stronger in the deciding set, which he wrapped up 6-4 for the victory.
It was a tough one. It was a tough one. My opponent had me in the second set. He won the second set 6-3. And then in the third set, I just had to change up a little bit. But it was a really tough one, and congrats to Nick on making it to the finals as well, you know.
The ladies' B title was an easier affair as Kobe Walcott got by Alison Watson-Jones in straight sets. Walcott took the first set 6-3 before returning to wrap up the second in a similar fashion.
It was a bit challenging, to tell you the honest truth. I had to go in with an open mind for all the matches that I played. I tried my best not to underestimate anyone that I came up against, and I did my best, and I put my heart out where my racket is.
Kyle Millwood took the Class 2 men's title with a 2-1 win over Daniel Giles. Millwood lost the first set 5-7 but soared back to a 6-2, 6-3 victory in the second and third sets. And Stuart Allen came from a set down to beat Richard McNair in Class 3 action. Allen lost the first set 3-6 but won the following two sets 7-5, 6-love. The ladies' doubles was won by Bridget Foster Hilton and Alison Watson-Jones over Kim Loy Wint and Maureen Williams 6-2. 6-1. And that's where we leave the courts for now. And I am Jermaine Brown.
Thanks so much, Jermaine. Steph Curry, where does he now rank among the all-time greats?
Look, I think when you mentioned all-time greats, Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Abdul-Jabbar, he's right up there now in the pantheon of that discussion, certainly, because, and you could see it on him. It was so emotional for him. This is his first time winning finals MVP. He has won the regular season on a few occasions, but this one was quite sweet for him, and you could see that. And they came from behind to win the series 4-2, because remember they lost the game 1 at Boston.
Okay. That's interesting. Well, that's the Midday News. I'm Giovanni Dennis. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, have a good afternoon.